Hi, this is Shane Davis. It was August of 2007 when my son Kerry and I went to the Rolls-Royce Owners Club annual meet in Washington's Columbia Gorge. Through the years I have owned my Continental, I have spent many hours cleaning, preparing, and showing the car, and have acquired many trophies. Therefore, I had very little time to see the other cars and to talk to the many interesting people at the meets. But here in Skamania, I asked Mr. Ron Budworth to share his experiences with the Continentals, as well as relate other intriguing aspects of his career. Here are a few of his recollections.
The start of my career with Rolls-Royce was just after the war, in 1944, September the 4th to be exact. And I was very, very interested in becoming involved in the motor car business as opposed to the railway business, which is where my father was the chief metallurgist in the railway works steel foundry. I was fortunate enough to be accepted, providing that I was willing to become an office boy first, which meant running messages and all this kind of thing all over the factory and through the offices. And then was allowed to start my apprenticeship training approximately 6 months after arriving at the factory doors. So the training involved starting in the machine shop and working machines that under tutor that made bolts, turned bolts, all the metal components that were produced at Rolls-Royce at different times and different machines. Until then, I was taken into the mechanical section, which was then the start of my career with hands-on work on the motor cars themselves. After a number of years of this learning process, under the tutorship of an experienced technician always, I was finally invited to become involved in the actual production work that went on with the cars. And ultimately, I was then, this opened a door for me to become involved in the test shop, which of course was a much sought after objective, and I was taken into the test shop, and again under a senior test driver learned the ropes of testing the Rolls-Royces and the Bentleys, mostly Bentleys because they were the ones that were produced in greater number immediately after the war. As we received the next car for testing, we would receive also a complete history book on the vehicle up to that point, its assembly and complete fitment, so that we would know, number one, any special equipment that the customer had ordered, who the customer would be, and what particular main interest he had and expected from his motor car. So this was all taken into account, and as we received the cars, we of course were required to check all the adjustments under the engine. I should mention here that one engine in 100 would be pulled from the engine build shop and put through the test on the test beds for the equivalent of 100 miles, and run at full throttle, and then that one engine would be stripped to the last bolt, and all of the measurements of each and every bolt, all measurements that could be taken were taken, and that engine then would be reassembled and installed into the car that it was allotted to. So the standard of workmanship was extremely high, as befit the Rolls-Royce reputation. After setting up the car, making sure that all bolts were tight and this and that and the other, running the engine, fine-tuning the carbs, then we would venture out onto the road, and in the beginning I remember that we would probably do something close to 100 miles on the first test. That would not be the time that we would do all-out testing. It would be putting mileage on the car, checking the adjustments as we drove, and pulling off at the side of the road to do fine-tuning and measures of this kind. The second, after all adjustments had been rechecked at the shop, the second test would be approximately 50 miles, depending if all things had passed the test. If not, then it would be returned to the test shop, mechanical shop, for further work before doing any further testing. Then once all that was complete, it would be retested again. And one might ask, well, how many miles did they do when they were road testing? It could go up as high as 500 on each new car, and the speedometer was set in such a way that there would be only the road test miles on it when it was delivered. So it. The most important thing was the car's ability to pass all the tests in readiness for its owner. And the next road test in the scheme of things would be something approaching 50 miles that would enable us to do some throttle work and acceleration and things of testing brakes, extensively testing brakes from high speed down, testing gear shifting, clutch action, all of this. And the Continentals were a limited edition, and since we are looking at a Continental here, I can say that the requirement for its superior performance would be to achieve 54 miles an hour at approximately 4,400 RPM, and then continue on through the shift pattern, achieving approximately 83 before shifting from second to third, and then achieving 105 thereabouts, and I can't be exact because I'm speaking from memory, 105 before shifting into fourth, and then we would just run it until the RPM indicator showed red line, and then it would be measured at that point for its ability to achieve those limits that were prescribed to us. Of course, the regular sedans did not have the performance or the gearing of the Continental, so they were under a different test regimen. And of course the Continental was always an exciting moment for the test drivers, because they was not that plentiful. They were not that plentiful, and they were such a lovely car to drive. We, of course, during all of this time, had been paying attention to any nuisance noises, such as minor body squeaks or rattles. We would detect those, and if we were able to make an adjustment on the road as we stopped and checked things out, then we would do so. But if not, it would go into what we call the rattle department, and of course they would sort through it and rectify any such things. Testing for gear noises from timing gears, which of course are audible in the car, given the tester's good hearing, and also axle gear noise, gearbox gear noise. All of these things were tested, and on occasion, when axle noises became somewhat difficult to pinpoint, we would have one of the test drivers either in the back of the Continental or the regular car with a stethoscope, and we would trace it down and then either reject the component for a replacement, or we would determine that it was acceptable. Brakes, of course, came into it as well, along with road holding and directional stability. All of this kind of thing would be part of what we were doing. And so eventually we would get to the point where the chief test driver would join the test driver on the final run, and hopefully for the test driver it would be accepted by the senior tester. So then it would be delivered to its customer.
So what would be the top speed that you attained in any of these Continentals?
The top speed challenge was having enough road to, because we were not tracking them, we were on the regular roads. Experimental, of course, would track them, but we were on regular roads. So we were contained to some degree by the availability of open road, and we hoped to have the opportunity to get it up to something close to 128 miles an hour. Yeah.
Now those were the lightweight ones. The heavier ones, would they go at equal speed?
The lightweight ones would be somewhat faster through the gears. There's no question about that. But even the lightweight ones were fairly heavy cars because of the structure that went into it, the extra structural stiffness that was required also added weight. So I'm not going to be able to answer that question from memory, because I don't know how many I can't recall how many lights I tested and how many normal weights I would test, but I should think there probably would be a differential of 3 to 4 miles an hour, something of that order.
You did test some of the later series, the S1 Continentals, did you?
Yes, the S1s, yes, as I recall it, yes.
And did they differ terribly or too much between the R-Type and the S-Type?
Providing it was the manual shift, not a lot, no.
But not many of the S1s had manual shift, did they?
No, mostly automatic. That was the inception of automatic in the Continental itself, yeah.
So you enjoyed your days working at Rolls-Royce as a test driver?
Oh, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, my time working for Rolls-Royce, both under the corporate heading of Rolls-Royce and Bentley, and at the retail level through the dealerships of the world, have been a wonderful career, and I can only say that I'm most grateful to have had such an experience.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. It's really super.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I can remember going out for my first test on a Continental with a senior tester by the name of Wallace Hines, and he put it through its paces for me, and I couldn't believe the difference between its capability and the capability of the regular Bentley. You know, it was just simply phenomenal. And
how did the S-Type performance-wise? Rolls-Royce, obviously speed was difference, but there's a larger chassis, different chassis.
Yeah, no, the road holding of each car for its own purpose was exceptional in the Bentley line, and I say that because some of the Rolls-Royces, the customers had no interest at all in speed and performance and handling. Their chauffeur would do the driving, and also their specifications that they requested added a tremendous amount of weight to the individual car, and so it would make a big difference to its performance capabilities.
Yes.
But safety was always there. Yes. And of course, a head of seat belts is what we're talking about
of course,
here,
yes.
Yeah. And one always felt that it was a very safe experience to be testing.
Yes. Yeah. And compared to other cars of the period, was it sort of far superior or on a level pegging with some of the more sort of its equivalents of the day?
I don't think that anything quite came to the level of the Bentley Continental that was being produced. They would have different approaches to performance.
Yes.
For instance, if you're talking about Mercedes-Benz, you're talking about Porsche and these the early models of that. They manufactured capable cars, but and Jaguar,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
very capable cars. But I think that the Continental was outstanding in its level
Yes.
of capability. Yeah.
Daimler's.
Yeah.
Jaguars
Daimler's.
and all the
Yes, the Daimler would not stay with the Bentley Continental. Yeah, no. I was sent out to Canada along with some of my colleagues who sent to the USA to Rolls-Royce Incorporated. I was sent to Canada, to Montreal, which was the head office of Rolls-Royce in Canada, and we used the corner of the aircraft division, the aircraft engine overhaul division on the Côte de l'Est in Montreal. So that's where we had our business, and at that point, 1959, Of course, it was still the S series and moving ever so slowly towards its next design.
Yes.
And during that time, that we went from the 6-cylinder to the V8, and so there was a different feel to the car from that point on.
Yes.
However, I was still employed by Rolls-Royce until 1987, and then but I was at that point in Vancouver, having been transferred out to cover the Western Canada sales and service, and then the dealer offered me an opportunity to join their staff and form a luxury car division. They had Rolls-Royce and Bentley,
yes.
and this dealer was at that time Clark Simpkins.
Yes.
It had just taken over from Dealey.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
yeah. And so I thought about it. I just completed 25 years with the factory, and we talked about a possible transfer, and if there was a transfer, what progress would I be making through the company, through the hierarchy, and in terms of earnings. And then I made my decision to join the dealer at that point. But you know, I stayed in the same office that I was using as the company office. I stayed in that, so it was like no difference at all, except that my earnings went up.
Good. Did you sort of cross paths with John Craig? Who was obviously
in England,
based in
yes.
Vancouver?
Cross paths with John in London. I spent about 3 months at the London service department, and going through aftermarket problems that customers were experiencing that you couldn't produce under test conditions. They had to be driven, and then these things, if they showed themselves, would then be so I needed to know that kind of incident, you know, what we'd been running into.
And he was on the sales side, finding the customers, of course.
Yes, at that point, I was strictly concerned with service, and later it was put on my responsibilities to handle sales as well. So I took a number of training courses, one through the University of Montreal, and found that I liked it very much, and continued on then with that dual role of sales and service. So yes, my time with John was very useful and well spent to prepare me more for the outside marketplace.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. And when did you stop working for Rolls? When did you decide to retire? Enough was enough.
Oh, altogether,
Even though you're still involved.
Yeah, 1998. My new employer, which was Carter Motor Cars, had freely given me the opportunity to create the division that I wanted as far as the sports side of it was concerned. And so at that point we had brought on Ferrari, and then I went after Alfa Romeo, so that I had more of a balanced marketing strategy, and then we brought on Maserati.
Yeah, so you were on Burrard Street in
That's
Vancouver
true.
at the time.
Yes. It was a very fine showroom.
Yes, indeed.
And Carters were a very progressive organisation that that enabled me to do the things that I did with success, and I certainly thank them for that, you know. Yeah. So altogether, it was a wonderful career. Part of it, the best part of it, of course, was getting the invitations from the different manufacturers that I've just named to go and test their cars at this track or that track or the other track in Italy, in England, in the States.
The fun part.
Yeah. So, and they would have the cars lined up. Can you imagine 8 Bentley Turbo R's lined up, ready for driving, you know, and
Go Playboys.
yeah, and that was at Mosport.
Yes.
And it was very exciting, very exciting. Yeah.
Phil Entwistle is no stranger to Bentley Continentals. He owns this S-Series Mulliner Continental Sports Saloon. Phil relates his trip to the Columbia Gorge from North Vancouver.
Do you enjoy driving this one, Phil?
Well, yes. It came down I-5 at 65, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And apart from getting an incredible amount of stares and good looks and thumbs up from everybody that went by, the car behaved beautifully.
Yeah.
It's so stable and smooth.
Yeah.
It's an effortless drive.
In our car, Kerry was driving at 80 to 85 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It was gorgeous. Yeah.
Well, we were in no hurry.
No.
As you may know, the S-Series Continental followed the R-Type Continental. It was somewhat larger and heavier, plus it came predominantly with an automatic gearbox. The engine was larger and produced more power. The coachwork was altered and offered more comfort. The driving experience is quite different to the R-Type Conti. It was great to watch the Continentals being cleaned and then driven to the judging field. To see a Continental at rest or in motion has always been a pleasure and an excitement for me. However, to drive one, it is just like being in heaven.